So are Democrats being debased? That's kind of our Cavuto play on words tonight as middle-class protests against illegal immigration are breaking out. The White House appealing to Hispanic lawmakers to reaffirm their political base. And former Republican political consultant, crisis management expert Mark Serrano thinks this issue could really hurt the Democrats come November. And Fox Business All-Stars, they're here tonight as well. Hadley Heath Manning, Scott Martin, and Carrie Sheffield are all here. And we'll get to our All-Stars in a moment. But, Mark, first of all, explain to us how. Because the Democrats love this issue, right? Traditionally, immigration, and it should help. But this time around, you think it's going to really backfire.
Well, absolutely. It's backfiring. But more importantly, it's spinning into more of a political PR crisis for the Democrats. And let me tell you how they got here.
Sure, go ahead.
It's their number one issue for this Congress, right? Number one signature domestic issue. And what happened is, as the pictures were coming through to us on TV monitors of the crisis on the border, at the same time, the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office issued a report, and that report said that working-class Americans in the first 10 years of the Democrats' immigration policy will see a decline in their earnings over that 10-year period.
Right.
At the same time,
you're making essentially what might end up being a very effective political argument or interpretation of what's happening for the fall. Are you seeing it in the data yet? Is it showing up in polling where it's going to have a tangible effect negatively on the Democrats?
Absolutely, especially among working-class Americans. Okay, their support for President Obama has come down more than any other voting group. These are Reagan Democrats.
They're angry about immigration.
They are part of the core. Well, they're angry about their paycheck.
We'll bring the panel in to talk about this a little bit. Carrie's here in studio with us as well. To back that up, the Rasmussen put a poll together on that, and they did find in their data people earn under $30,000 a year prefer a reduction in immigration by a 3-to-1 margin. So that would back up to some extent what Mark is saying. Your view on it is what?
Right. No, I agree. I mean, this is the forces of globalization, and this is the effect when you have unrestricted immigration. It suppresses the wages for low-income and low-education people here in the U.S.
So you think it'll hurt them in the fall?
Well, I do think the general population, if you look, so Pew, the gold standard of research, Pew came out and they looked for 2014, the number 6 issue is immigration. So actually, there are 5 other issues that are much more pressing. We're talking about health care, the budget deficits, the general job situation. So I don't think that immigration will be a lightning rod for the Democrats to run on, and I think these pictures can only hurt them. Let
me ask Scott about a business side of this, which I think is actually interesting when you talk about immigration, and that is that at the end of the day, I think we all want, and this, talk about stories, by the way, that get ignored, which was the focus of our last segment when we were talking about the veterans. But months ago, we were doing segments all the time on how we want a quote-unquote sensible immigration policy where you'll have highly skilled immigrants coming into the country. They'll get educated here. They'll stay here, right? And that'll help the economy. Nobody's talking about that anymore. It's all the border crisis. So American business, in my view, could get hurt by this to some extent.
Well, I think they could, Connell. Now, one thing that's helped businesses, though, and frankly, shareholders, I mean, we talk about this widening income gap in the United States. I mean, the companies have done better, though, with lower or cheaper wages as far as cheaper labor. So that's one thing that's benefited, I guess, the company side, the owners, the stockholders, which are the high-end people, right, that own a lot of that stuff, and hurt the lower end. Because if you look at the economy, we've created another 8 million jobs, right, since the recession in 2008. Well, guess what? Half of those jobs have been low-wage jobs. You know, those are former middle-class jobs that have gone into the low-wage, blue-collar spot. And so you're hurting that low end, but helping that high end that's helping stock prices, as we've seen in the last few years.
Fair point. Hadley Heath Manning, your view on all this in terms of who it helps and hurts politically?
I mean, even if you are one of those people who immigration is your number one issue, you have to remember that back in 2010, I'd remind everyone, President Obama and his party had full control of the lawmaking bodies of our government, and they didn't address immigration. They chose instead to give us Obamacare. So that will be a bigger issue this fall, something, again, that's going to be trouble for Democrats.
That's, Carrie, kind of what you were getting at. And, Mark, the Republicans do what? To take advantage of this or to play into what's happening, what we've been talking about?
Well, they remind voters that this is the Democrats' number one issue. Okay, because the Democrats will start to run away from this issue if they can. But the key here is not so much whether it's a top issue for voters. It's about the general political environment and how this impacts middle-class and working-class Democrats, Reagan Democrats, and whether or not they're going to be willing to come to the polls in November to support Democrats.
That's interesting, and we can go around around the horn, so to speak, one last time on that. Carrie, you first. The term Reagan Democrats, you don't hear it as much as you used to, but Mark's used it twice. Do you think they're back for real?
Well, no, it's interesting. I think, well, I mean, I always want to talk about Reagan as much as I can, but I think there is a sense, if you look at who votes in the midterms versus the general, it does tend to be more sort of blue-collar, white, middle-class workers as opposed to the general, which looks a little bit more diverse. I mean, that's just a function of how it works. So I would argue that these are the voters who are going to be more upset about what's happening with the border crisis situation. And I do agree with you about sort of lumping immigration as comprehensive. I mean, I think Obamacare, if anything, taught us the more you lump everything and try to make everything massive and put everything together instead of incremental changes. I think that if we parse out the high-skilled immigration from...
Which a lot of people could come to agreement on, by the way.
I absolutely agree, but it's Obama is the one who is demanding, and the Democrats are demanding, that they're all lumped together as comprehensive.
And the working class sees their jobs being taken, the competition for their jobs with the growing supply of labor based on the Democrats' immigration policy.
Right, and why these, the Reagan Democrat part of it is interesting. Maybe with the way the environment is, whether they would even be considering voting Democrat this time around is questionable anyway. We'll have much more time with the All-Stars tonight. And Mark, thank you. Appreciate that.